All right, that little jam from Chandra and the Flames, a group from Kaladesh. Inventors and artificers from there, and what they say about artificers can really handle a steel pipe. Hello, put one on the board for Baron. Okay. Speaking of steel, Khan, you're a large metal man. You must be packing. What is packing? Well, Khan, you know what? Never mind. It's childish and immature, and I apologize for that. And this is Radio Free Dominaria. Baron in the morning. Let's get to that forecast. We go back to a hunk of metal. A two, Khan, a hunk of metal. So, Khan, what's the weather like? Weather light. What? No, Khan, what's the weather like? What is the weather like? Weather light. It's weather light. No, it isn't. Okay, well, anyway, let's move on. In sports, we're going to go around the multiverse with our intrepid sports reporter who travels the plains, Urza Planeswalker. Urza, what's the latest scores and stories from around the plains?
The latest scores and stories around the plains, Baron? Do you hear yourself? Is this what I'm doing here? You need to get out of this slow time zone and start doing something.
Yes, okay, Urza, yes, please. The scores.
Oh, the scores. Really, Baron? Okay, sure, yeah. Here's your update from around the multiverse. How about this, Baron? Did you hear Harry caught the golden snitch in a big win for Hufflepuff?
Right, okay, well, thank you, Urza. It'd be Gryffindor.
Oh, of course it would be. Oh, okay, well, how about from the Shire, where Frodo recovered the ring?
Well played, Urza. All right, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
No, but Baron, we had a big upset at the races where Luigi won on Rainbow Road.
Okay, thank you, Urza, very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Baron. How about this for a little bit closer to home, where the Keldons got overrun and annihilated by dark invaders known as Phyrexians, all the while you sit here and you're playing radio in the...
That's Urza Planeswalker with sports. Thank you. Wow. I got it. What? What's that? I got it. What do you got? A skyship. What? A skyship. A skyship? The weather light. You said, what's the weather light? It's a skyship. No, well, yes, the weather light is a skyship, but I asked, not what I said or asked. I asked, what is the weather like? A skyship. No, I'm kidding. What? I'm only kidding. I know what you said. Oh, really? Put one on the... Well, put one on the board for Khan. I'm stunned. Okay, so what's the weather like? It's dark. No, that's not right. All right, thank you so much. I'm joking. Okay, that's very funny. I bring the funny. Okay, well, thank you very much, Khan. We're going to get back to the music. This is a little band called the Brotherhood of Gix with You Complete Me. Radio Free Dominaria. Baron in the morning.
Stick your fingers in my hair, plunge them in and slurp my dreams, suck my brain until I'm dead. You complete me.
Chapter 21. The seemingly endless plains of Wrath were, in fact, not. There was a limit to the amount of flowstone the Stronghold had been able to produce in its millennium of operation. Here at the edge of Wrath, the sky boiled as if alive with fire, a riot of red and orange distorted ever so slightly like flames reflected from polished metal. It was a sight to twist the most sane mind into a terrifying shadow of its former self. The physical boundary of a plane was not meant for contemplation by mortal man. Devol, however, could hardly count as such anymore. He had been completed to the point where he lived indefinitely, if at the sufferance of his Phyrexian masters. 6 centuries of life,
one in waiting and 5 more here on Wrath as Steward Evankar, really. For his last 120 years of his stewardship, it could be said that he truly ruled this plane. Since Krog had fallen beneath the sword of Crag, the Witch King, the Phyrexian had been forced to slowly heal over the past 12 decades. He was in no shape to challenge Devol, whose mastery of Flowstone and the machinery of the stronghold made him powerful. Devol was finally powerful, out from under the shadow of the Phyrexian Inner Circle member. Krog rested in a place of darkness few knew of, and where none could wonder at how the Phyrexian had almost been destroyed at the hands of a mortal Dominarian. Such was their new relationship. Krog was able to delay and heal rather than return to Phyrexia and face possible rending, and Devol ruled Wrath as Evankar, with an unspoken but present guarantee that Krog's reports back to Phyrexia would never endanger either of them. Devol had come to this point today, the farthest reaches of his realm. Here would be the most difficult spot to attempt a transference, the forces controlled by Wrath's greatest machinery at their weakest, and so relying more on his own ability. Armored troops waited in formal ranks behind him, silently menacing. Flowstone rippled as he made mental contact with the control machinery under the stronghold, focusing it against the nearby ground. Tan-colored waves rose in the landscape, shallow troughs running between them, as the machinery first worked the larger features into the surrounding plains. It was a slow process, and the pressure within his mind built to a steady ache. Simple vegetation followed in the transference, then the homes and utility buildings so common to every Benalish village. This was a Capuchin settlement, the clan that had long occupied Krog's attentions until his accident. Devol had decided to usurp those duties as well, the constant testing and probing, now that Keld was a forgotten experiment. The village formed as he recalled it, the control machinery pulling it from his memories. 2 worlds overlapped as the chaos that existed between planes was feather aside and the final barriers weakened. He felt the final moment of transference. His mind lay open to the people of the Benalish village who now beheld the chaos storming about them as Wrath intruded into their lives. Hundreds of humans, each a tiny flare within his mind as the great machinery seized his consciousness, heard the terrible wailing that encroached upon Wrath from the chaos between worlds. He felt that moment and held it. On his gesture, the armor-clad troops raised their weapons high and moved into the village, fighting, slaughtering, at once on Wrath and also Dominaria. Devol felt each one's life added to the pattern of the machinery forced upon his mind, a tangible weight pressing down on him. The tiny flare extinguished as another Dominarian fell before his troops. The warriors traveled dim streets, now only half lit by sunlight. Devol directed his soldiers toward specific people, wanting to bring over those who would represent a good cross-section of the village. Dominaria was his hunting ground. No one could hide from him. Only he was not about to get all that he wanted. The attack faltered in places. He found himself distracted by the rising wail of disembodied voices. He was distracted by the press of new wills acting against his own. The intruders interfered with his control over the stronghold's machinery. This presence took on a luminescent, humanoid form within his mind as it wrestled into the pattern of transference in his mind. Devol's mind swam, his train of thought barely able to hold control over the great machinery. He tried to bring warriors against these apparitions plaguing his mind, but they possessed no physical form to attack. As he searched for ways to win the battle in his mind, he found the assault in front of his eyes going not as well as he'd hoped. Some Benalish held their own against the Phyrexian troops. Usually it was a single leather-clad soldier caught in the village during the attack, or perhaps on permanent assignment, but others joined in as well. Here a blacksmith wielded his hammer and crushed through Phyrexian armor and skull alike. Over there, a farmer employed his scythe to great effect, knocking legs out from under Devol's troops and leaving them helpless on the ground. There was no meeting such challenges to his troops, not while the haunting cries continued to threaten his control. As his warriors began to drag back victims, stepping from Dominaria to Wrath and leaving those Benalish no hope of return, Devol slowly released the barriers and allowed them to drift back into place. He had his subjects, though not as many as he would have liked. They would be set to live among the Vek, the Dahl, or the Kor. His final live warrior returned, straining, and acute pain shot through his mind with each strange haunting voice. Devol reached out to the places where he had felt Phyrexian lives harmed or destroyed and latched onto their physical forms. He pulled them back to Wrath even as the last barrier came crashing into place. The intrusive forms slipped away as well, melting back into the chaos that existed between planes. The strongest of them faded away last, and Devol reached out after that final alien presence, trying to wrestle his mental touch over its mind. There was an intelligence there, He could feel it, a whisper, just outside of his range of hearing. He pushed harder, rage over his partial failing today, lending him strength. Soltari. Then it was gone. A name? A place? Duvall had no way of knowing and no more strength left to pursue it. He stumbled to one knee, his weakness betraying him. Darkness swam over him, almost laying claim to his consciousness. He fought it off, refusing such a pitiful display in front of his warriors. Then he rose on shaky legs, dark eyes glowering at any Phyrexian watching him. Without a command given, he turned and walked with determined stride to the portal waiting several paces behind him. The gateway back to the stronghold. He'd been given a lot to think about, now he simply needed some time to put it all together. If Duvall had any two resources on his side, they were his ability to think and the time to do so. Shuffling out from the shadows with an odd, hunching motion, Krogh made himself known to Duvall with a screeching whisper.
You have news of Urza Planeswalker.
Krogh preferred to announce himself in such a way. It was better than allowing the steward to guess Krogh's presence by the dragging foot he kept hidden beneath his banded metal robes or the rasping wheeze of his artificial lung breathing. Duvall appeared to take pleasure in the Phyrexian's damaged state, but like it or hate it, Krogh certainly hated it. The Inner Circle member was in need of Wrath's first Evencar. Krogh required time for self-repair, certainly could not return to Phyrexia in such a state. No, that would not do. Wrath certainly was ahead of schedule now, but Urza Planeswalker still lived, and more, he was preparing Dominaria against the day of invasion. He was doubtful that the Planeswalker could effect any meaningful, widespread change before that glorious event, but admission of the attempt would be enough cause for an end to Krogh's existence. Gix's failure had been nowhere near so severe, and he had still been cast into the furnaces of Phyrexia. Krogh was of the Inner Circle. He was superior, at such a high pinnacle second only to the Dark One. The fall would be all the more long and merciless. He suffered the time spent away from his plans and power. Krogh's body contained meat at such a minute level that every cell could repair itself or rebuild its neighbor given time. However, without the use of Phyrexian devices and assistant operations, the cells first returned to their simpler meat form. As interesting and at times as sublime as the return of pure meat might have been, Krogh did not appreciate the feelings of helplessness and danger which had accompanied every moment. Duvall might have killed Krogh, easily so, and claimed a right to further completion through an impressive act as to slay a member of the Inner Circle, except Duvall was apparently not so ambitious or was too infatuated with his self-proclaimed title of Evencar. Krogh still could not just be sure if Duvall was too simple, too stupid, or just more patient and crafty than the Phyrexian had ever credited. He'd spent decades in consideration of such ideas while his body mended, unable to carry out previous designs with the strange subjects in Benalia or even attend to the routine on Wrath. Even Krogh's temporary return to the state of being meat didn't bring it with it an understanding of Duvall's mind. Later, though, he would have such an answer. He would know Duvall's mind, all in its place. He asked again.
Any news on Urza Planeswalker?
No, Krogh, Duvall interrupted, looking up from the newest batch of rained corpses that lay at his feet. No news of the negators currently hunting Urza. The Walker's been very cautious these last several years. He glanced back, his lips pulled into a tight, wide-mouthed grimace. I can't decide if Urza is worried for his own life for a change, or if he has gone to ground in protection of his plans. He paused. These, pointing at the mess in front of him, were not sent after the Planeswalker.
If this is not Urza's work, who else has destroyed Negator? Not the Vec.
Rebellious they might be, but the Vec, even in large numbers, should not be able to kill a Negator. Trees and flowers are mostly responsible for this, Duvall said, a frown pulling down the edges of his wide mouth. He brought his hands together, fingertips touching. Animals, a few elves. The place is called Yawgmoth, and it's dangerous, Krogh, perhaps more so than Urza Planeswalker. Nothing could be worse than Urza Planeswalker. Krogh looked carefully at Duvall, searching his pale skin face for signs of duplicity. The black skullcap Duvall wore still offered its inviting eye, the depression Krogh had seen fit to design into that protective cap. That would be the only way to be sure, but Krogh was not ready to dismiss Duvall yet. He shuffled closer, the few metal bands left on his covering robe rasping dryly for lack of glistening oil. Closer, Krogh saw that the corpses had mostly been crushed or blown apart by explosion. Very little suggested magic, though perhaps artifice.
Trees and plants do not stand in the way of Phyrexia.
He screeched and hissed. Duvall folded his arms over his chest. They do now. Yawgmoth is completely hostile. The land itself attacks.
Urza!
The name escaped Krogh before he bothered to consider.
This must be the walker's doing.
A shudder trembled through Krogh's underdeveloped joints. How many ways could the Planeswalker find to interfere with Phyrexia's return? Too many. Even once was too many. I don't believe so, Krogh. A seeker found this place. There's no evidence that Urza is involved. Plants that explode, trees which turn suddenly supple and smash warriors between them. Duvall kicked at the mangled leg of a negator, its hardened flesh shredded to the metal by some kind of shrapnel. A few wood splinters still protruded from the negator's area of pure meat. Too alien for the walker. He shook his head. No. This is something different.
Different is bad.
Krogh hissed, Duvall's soft speech beginning to wear on his patience. Krogh should order Duvall's voice completed, able to speak in proper Phyrexian.
Different must be Urza. Destroy this place. Yawgmoth.
Even the name caught in Krogh's throat. A moment of silence stretched out, marked only by the irregular timing of Duvall's blinking and Krogh's rasping breaths. No, Duvall finally said, without preamble or qualification, a straight denial of Krogh's order. The Phyrexian drew himself up to his full height, cleft skull at a higher level than Duvall's head. His eyes glowed with the passion of molten steel as he leaned close to Wrath's Evenkar.
You will do as ordered.
Krogh didn't account for the negator that suddenly appeared at Duvall's side as if summoned by magic. Small and compact, it moved with fluid grace. It was one of the faster creations Duvall had developed over the centuries, faster perhaps than Krogh, even at the Phyrexian's strongest, which this time was not. It carried a sawtooth shield. The other arm ended in a hand of oversized fingers, all metal, tipped and backed by corrosive fluid plungers. It had no armor to bind joints or slow its incredible response time. Krogh noticed suddenly with a tremble that something akin to fear. It had no completed ears. Would this creation even understand the Phyrexian language? Krogh was certain it would not. This negator took order in Duvall's meat-tongue language. This negator was present to kill Krogh, and at this point, it could do so. The Phyrexian never doubted that. Duvall, to his credit, never bothered to threaten or even imply that the Phyrexian should feel threatened, secure in his power. He simply repeated, No. Then, only after a slow step away from Krogh, he continued, If you want to attribute every threat to Urza Planeswalker, Krogh, you may, if you are that afraid of him. But we do not know enough of this Yawgmoth to risk incredible resources, yet. I refuse to underestimate an opponent. I will continue to press at this Yawgmoth and find its weakness, much as we did in Keld. When I have its measure, then I will destroy it, as a present for the Dark Lord. Krogh shook, every fiber and component screaming for Duvall's death. But buried in the steward's refusal was a truth the inner council member recognized. Duvall was correct in that the Phyrexians had a habit of blaming Urza for any and all failures, because in the 3 millennia of time, only Urza had orchestrated the defeat of Phyrexian plans. It could be possible that Krogh now overlooked a new threat, and the Phyrexian could ill afford another mistake. That did not make his defeat here any easier to accept. He would know satisfaction, but not yet, not until he had healed. Eyes blazing fiercely, casting red flickers before them, Krogh turned away and moved from the room with his odd shuffling motion. His teeth clicked in exasperation. He still needed Duvall, and Duvall obviously believed that he still needed Krogh, or the Phyrexian would have been killed. Krogh would rely upon that just for a bit longer. Then they would discover who was the true master of wrath. Perhaps a visit to the newer attractors had not been the best of Duvall's ideas, not after the meeting with Krogh, but his schedule called for monthly visits to inspire greater production of flowstone, and that meant today. Wrath's steward toured the complexes with brutal efficiency, executing workers if standards appeared lacking at all. By the time he reached the lower levels where the massive spinning blades drew glowing red lava up from Wrath's molten underworld, the Vec had been alerted to their master's fury and were found climbing over machinery and coaxing every last ounce of effort from the devices, as it should be. Duval took limited pleasure noting the steady rumble shaking the floor, his equipment holding up to stresses which would have caused the supports of the main attractors to buckle and give way. A large room surrounded the spot where the encased blades penetrated Wrath's flowstone crust to bore down into the lava beds far below. 100 Vec worked furiously over the controls, their blunt features bathed in sweat and soot. The heat pulsed at near insufferable temperatures, the air hot, sulphurous, and hardly breathable. Still, the machinery appeared to be well maintained, the joints greased with black sludge and most metal surfaces oiled for protection. He checked what few gauges he himself knew how to read and found the bladed dials rotating at full capacity. Perfect. Too perfect, in fact. "Vec!" he called out to the supervisor, ordering his presence. The humanoid ran over.
"This facility is pulling up lava at the same rate as the main attractor,"
Duval said, tapping the gauge. The supervisor nodded, eyes a pale but furious green, and saying nothing.
"But these facilities are better cared for,"
Duval shouted, his fury into the smaller man's face.
"Why are you not outperforming the main attractor by now?"
He flicked one hand toward a random worker, and immediately his negator leapt from the nearby shadows to seize the hapless Vec. With the violent motion, it broke the Vec's back in 3 places. The worker was left laying on the blistering hot metal floor, crying in pain. No Vec moved or spoke. Only the clanging and grinding of machinery spoiled a perfect moment of fear and loathing. Then the supervisor barked out quick orders, and everyone fell to work with renewed energy. The noises intensified, a cacophony of metallic protests. The throb that shook the floor quickened perceptibly. Walls shook, and in a few places gauges cracked for the additional stresses. A sudden leak of sulphurous yellow steam shot out from a ruined piping joint. Under such pressure, the thin steam sliced deep into one worker's leg like a fine blade and nearly amputated it. Everything else held, as Duval had known it would.
"Better,"
he said aloud, but not with anything resembling satisfaction. The increase in output would barely be felt in flowstone production. Wrath's borders stretched out so far that to achieve a constant rate of growth was now impossible. The violence he had just committed had been simply a show of power, but it didn't help him shake the feeling of uncertainty he carried around with him. Casting a deformed shadow over Duval's work here was Krogh. The self-proclaimed Evankar strolled imperiously from the room, grinding his anger beneath metal-shod heels. Duval knew that he should have waited, not tipped his hand so soon to the Phyrexian. The meeting had not been planned. That Krogh had returned to the more active sections of the stronghold did not bode well for the steward, who had hoped for another half-century or better. 5 more decades of progress, and Duval might have accomplished just a little bit more. Perhaps he might have killed Urza Planeswalker by then, and Krogh could have been safely disposed of so that Duval alone reaped the rewards of such a victory. Krogh had returned now, and upon learning of Yawgmoth, he had ordered, to Duval's mind, a poorly considered plan. Krogh had pushed for obedience, so Duval pushed back. He knew he could kill the injured Phyrexian, but he kept him around. If Krogh were gone, there would be another. It was better to have the devil you know, especially the one you know that you can defeat. Even now, Duval sensed his personal guardian keeping pace behind him, the negator stalking shadows with deadly fluidity ready to leap to Duval's defense in a fraction of a second. It was of simple construction, very durable, and able to tangentially threaten Krogh. Was it too soon? Did Krogh now worry enough to move against Duval, or consider the idea that Duval instead made a better ally than enemy? It's a question with no easy answer. His echoing footsteps and those of his negator drove home the reality of exactly how alone he was here on Wrath. Duval stalked the stronghold's lower levels and considered the possibility that today he had chosen wrong. Today, the first time in better than 600 years, he had made his first major mistake.